Piemonte is a really quite an undiscovered region. When I talk to friends about doing tours in Piemonte, the first question is often, where is Piemonte? So I need to kind of start in a very maybe a more basic way talking about Piemonte than I will in a couple of weeks talking about Tuscany. So my talk today will focus on first a really brief history, then talking about the main capital city, Torino, or Turin, as a lot of people know it, and the environs just around Turin. The wine regions, I'm going to touch on that briefly because I'm going to be passing the baton to Francesco, who's going to take over the second part of this talk. And I'm going to look at it really from a scenic perspective at the gorgeous little hill towns. Then we're going to move into the mountains and finally the lakes. Now, Piemonte is up in the very northern western kind of part of Italy. You can see that it borders France and also a bit of Switzerland, and also this valley here called the Aosta Valley, which we'll talk about in terms of the mountains. But this is geographically where you find Piemonte. Now, Piemonte does not have a coastline. You can see down there in the south that Liguria wraps around what we might call the Mediterranean, the Riviera of the Mediterranean. Now, Piemonte has a long history, as you can imagine. Every place in Italy does. It was colonized by the Romans in the 2nd century BC, as the Romans were moving up into what was then considered to be Gaul, and it established or laid along a main trade route between Gaul and what would become Rome, or the boot of Italy. In the Middle Ages, it became an important it was along a major pilgrimage route, which is what the map is that I have here on the screen. This is called the Via Francigena. Some of you may be familiar with the Camino di Santiago. This is lesser known, but no less interesting. It goes all the way from Canterbury in England through France and down all the way to Rome, passing through Piemonte. Piemonte is also very famous, even in contemporary history, as the home of the kings of Italy and the House of Savoy. The Savoy family were a noble family since 1003. Put that into some context. Many of you may be familiar with William the Conqueror. That's 1066. So this family has been around for over 1,000 years, and they really shaped Piemonte. And much of what we're going to talk about today is because of that House of Savoy. Now, Torino is also famous not just for food and for the other things we'll talk about, but it was the first capital of a unifying Italy. Italy did not unify until the 1860s, and Torino was the capital. And here you see the Alps surrounding it. Now, Torino is not just at the base of the Alps. Remember that, or maybe you don't know this, that the word piede means foot, monte means mountain. So Piemonte is at literally the foot of the mountains, just almost encircled by Alps and other mountains. But Turin is also located right along Italy's longest river, the Po. And here you can see the Po going through the city of Torino with gorgeous parks, as you might find in any other capital city. Because it is a grand European capital city, home of the royal family of Italy, you're going to find very elegant shops and boulevards, gorgeous arcaded shopping areas, and wonderful cafes. Here we have a gorgeous Art Deco cafe where you can stop in and have a nice cappuccino or something. Now, what Torino is most famous for, probably, is the Shroud of Turin. The Shroud of Turin was first documented in the 1300s, acquired, not sure exactly how, but acquired by the Savoy family in the 1400s. And then a chapel was built in the 1600s to house it next to the royal palace. Now, that the first king of Italy, Vittorio Emanuele II, was born in this gorgeous building right in the center of Torino. just down the street from the Royal Palace of Turin. You can see was built in the 1600s. Turin really has, to me, kind of a really pan-European feel. You could be in Switzerland, or you could be in places in France. It has a really different feel than what you might see in Rome, for example, or Florence, or even further south in Naples. Here's the interior of that gorgeous royal palace, not going to be outdone by the big capital cities of further north in Europe. Here is the cupola of their chapel, which is attached to the palace. That is the cupola of the chapel that holds that shroud of Turin. It was built in the 1600s. The shroud is not visitable. You can see a replica of it, but it is kept there in that chapel. Now, most of the time, what I really advise people to do when spending time in Torino is just to wander, visit some of the gorgeous, elegant cafes, and enjoy a cappuccino and a pastry, or even look for chocolate. Now, you might not have thought that we were going to talk about chocolate today, but because of that royal family, the Savoy, the first hot chocolate coming from the New World was served in the 1560s to the royal family of the House of Savoy, and the first chocolate license in Torino granted in the 1670s. So they have a very long history with chocolate. Now, a specialty and a favorite in Piemonte and also in the rest of Italy is what's called gianduja, which is chocolate and hazelnut. Many of you may be familiar with Nutella, which is a chocolate hazelnut spread for the masses, and it became so popular that it made its founder the richest man in Italy for a while. Now, the chocolate coming from the New World, hazelnuts coming from the Langhe, which is the region that we'll be visiting a lot with Francesco later in the wine region. Now, a way to combine the chocolate and the coffee is in what we call the bicchierine, which means literally the little glass. It is a layer of espresso, and then hot drinking chocolate and steamed milk. And you don't use that spoon. Not even sure why they give you that spoon. Maybe it's just to scoop it out at the end. But you just drink it in the layers like this. And you could drink it in what was the China storage room of the Royal Palace that's now been turned into a cafe. So gorgeous cafes and bars all throughout Turin. Something that is also a little known about Turin is it is the place where modern formulas or recipes for vermouth were created. Now, vermouth is a fortified wine. It includes different types of herbs, spices, and even bark and roots. It's often used as a mixer. That's how we often know of it. But you can actually go through and almost do a vermouth pub crawl if you wanted to, tasting different types of vermouth in its home in Torino. Now, this is not a mistake. We're not in Cairo right now. This is a photo that I took at the Egyptian Museum in Torino. This is the largest, if you can believe it, the largest dedicated Egyptian museum outside of Cairo. It is a fantastic museum and one that you could easily spend a day visiting. All you need is to use their great audio guide. The displays are phenomenal. The explanations are in English. I highly recommend carving out some time visiting the Egyptian Museum. And Turin, like Paris, like London, like other places around capitals of Europe, they all kind of caught this Egyptomania in the 1800s. And Jean-Francois Champollion was famous to have said that the road to Memphis and Thebes passes through Turin because of their fantastic collection of not just statues and other artifacts, but also the texts that were so important to him. Now, moving out into the suburbs, you may know or may not know that Fiat was founded in Torino in the late 1800s, and they built what was then a state-of-the-art factory in 1920, where they used an assembly line technique that we often will attribute to Henry Ford, but their assembly line was in this state-of-the-art building, and the cars moved along a track, spiraling up and up and up until they reached the roof of the building. And on that roof, there was a final racetrack, kind of a loop, where the cars would come out, do a victory lap, and then go off to their showroom floor. Well, this has since 1980s been remodeled, repurposed. The architect that was involved is named, very famous man named Renzo Piano. He was responsible for designing the Shard in London, if you're familiar with that. And he included this bubble, which is a special meeting room. There's a hotel, there's shops, there's a museum there that has Matisse and Modigliani in it, collection from the founder of Fiat. And what you're seeing here also now, they have a botanical garden. So gorgeous repurposing of this historic building. Now, another historic and very important building, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention it, excuse me, is what's called the Mole Antonelliana, which was built in the 1860s, which is also right at the time that Italy was unifying. It was originally meant to be a synagogue. There was a large Jewish community, and the architect that they hired just kind of got more enthusiastic and bigger plans and bigger plans. And, you know, if you're in Hawaii, you know about the rail, it kind of went the direction of a lot of public works projects, that it just got a little bit bigger and bigger and more expensive. So it took far too long to finish. And it became kind of this iconographic building of Torino. But it didn't ever become a synagogue, because the Jewish community shrunk. Part of them moved down to Florence when Italy unified. And now, in addition to being a landmark on the skyline, it now holds the National Museum of Italian Cinema. Now, we're moving out and out and out and away from Torino. Just on the outskirts, about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from Torino, is this gorgeous, mysterious, mystical place, the Sacra di San Michele. It was founded by the Benedictine monks in 966 AD, and it was the inspiration from for the famous Italian author Umberto Eco, who wrote a book called The Name of the Rose. Some of you may have heard about the book or seen the movie with Sean Connery. And in this Benedictine abbey, they had a wonderful scriptorum, which were the abbeys and monasteries in Europe were very important in the Middle Ages, partly because they were copying and recopying manuscripts from ancient texts. They were doing that here. They were also hosting pilgrims along that Via Francigena that I showed you on the map earlier in our talk. Now, back to that House of Savoy, we're never very far from them. There are numerous palaces scattered all over Piemonte, collectively are a UNESCO World Heritage Site. And one of those just outside of Torino is called the Stupinigi Hunting Lodge. You can see built in 1729. Now, this is an enormous hunting lodge. They're not going to be outdone by any of the Habsburgs or any of the French royalty. And they would host their guests here for grand hunting weekends. And just so you know, it's not a barn inside. That's the interior of the Stupinigi Hunting Lodge. Now, another very famous palace just outside of Torino, these are easy, all of these very easy day trips from Torino, is the Venaria Palace. This one is from a little bit earlier and very famous and popular with Instagram photographers. So gorgeous palace from the 1600s. Moving out a little bit even farther, and I'm just going to touch on this because Francesco is going to do a lot more thorough and interesting talk about Italian or Piemontese wines than me, but I'd be remiss if I didn't take you into the wine region, which, as you take a look at this arrow, I'm going to circle it with my cursor. This is where Turin is, and you can see how much of Piemonte is taken up by the different wine regions and different wine varietals. But this is just to whet your appetite for going out into this gorgeous landscape. Unlike Tuscany, The hills are really absolutely covered with vineyards. I was shocked the first time that I went because I was used to more southern Umbrian and Tuscan uh, hills and wineries where you have more oak and more olive trees. Well, here they're just absolutely covered with vineyards. Very striking, especially in the fall, which of course is when I do my tours because those leaves are changing. It's gorgeous. And there's also many, many beautiful little hill towns. Here's Monforte d'Alba. This is Asti, where they make a great sparkling wine. And so just traveling around in your wine tasting, stopping off and having a gorgeous lunch at any of these small towns. Now, one of those small towns, I'm not going to take you above, but below ground is called Canelli. Canelli has underground what they call wine cathedrals because they have dozens of kilometers, not meters, kilometers of these wine caves or cathedrals where they can store the wine in a situation where the wines are at a pretty constant temperature. These Canelli underground wine cathedrals are actually a UNESCO World Heritage Site as well. So you could spend a day doing some tastings underground in the Canelli wine cathedrals. Now, of course, in Italy, as you know, food and wine go together, and Piemonte is a region very well known for its cuisine. I know David Tordi talked with you about the cuisines of Italy last week, but this is a region that rivals any of them in terms of its cuisine. Torino, for example, has more Michelin star restaurants than any other city in Italy. So this place at Pollenzo, the University of Gastronomic Sciences, is not far from the place which founded the slow food movement, which is a reaction to America and their exportation of fast food. In Italy, there's a slow food movement. And this University of Gastronomic Sciences gives a 3-year degree, and they focus on sustainable agriculture, gastronomy, and really working on reviving traditional varietals or food types, these kinds of things. So it's a culinary, but also a food science research institute. And they also have something called the wine bank. So you can go through this wine bank. I did this last year and see wines from all over Italy, not just from Piemonte. Now, one of the products that is most famous, absolutely, we cannot not talk about the white truffles from Piemonte. And every October through December, they have the White Truffle Fair at Alba, which is in this Langhe area, so famous for its wine. You could go there, spend a day looking at the markets where they're selling the white truffles. And white truffles, if you've never priced them, can be over 10,000 euros a kilo. So these white truffles are highly, highly valued and prized. If you're not interested in buying any white truffle and taking it back to your agriturismo, then you could just stop in one of these gorgeous little restaurants, and they will be on all of the menus. Now, as we're leaving this gorgeous area of the wine regions, the wine lands, we're going to head up into the mountains. This one is Monte Rosa, one of the Alps that rings around Piemonte. And I've circled here some of the more famous landmarks in Piemonte. You can see starting at the top, the Matterhorn, Mont Blanc, or Monte Bianco in Italian, and the Gran Paradiso National Park. I included Torino here just to give you a sense of scale, and that you can see that the Gran Paradiso National Park is just an hour and 15 minutes away, to give you a sense of how far away these internationally known landmark mountains are. Now you can see up there at Mont Blanc, you can also see that I've circled a town. Maybe you can't see it, but it's there. It's called Courmayeur. And Courmayeur is on the Italian side of the Alps, but you can take a series of lifts up and over Mont Blanc to Chamonix, France, from Italy. So that would be an amazing thing to do as the skiers are doing, or during the hiking season. This is Gran Paradiso National Park. Here you see the cross-country skiers, but this is a little bit more my speed, visiting these gorgeous national parks in the summertime for some hiking. Now, Piemonte also has a gorgeous lakes, rivaling Lake Como. You don't have to go to, visit George Clooney. Go to the little lesser known, but still gorgeous lake of Lago Maggiore, or the beautiful little boutique lake, Lake Orta. So I have big red arrows there to both of those. Now, you can arrive at these lakes by flying into Milan or Turin. You can take trains, or the easier way to get there, at least to Lake Orta, would be with car. But Lago Maggiore from Milan, you can get up to the town of Stresa in about an hour by train. It's very easy to get up to Stresa, which is our next stop. Stresa was on the kind of grand tour of the late 1800s, early 1900s of the British and the American wealthy families traveling around Europe. And the people would stop in these very elegant old world style hotels. So here you can see one of those, probably the most famous on the lake, Hotel Borromei. This was a hotel made famous because of Ernest Hemingway, who during World War I convalesced at this lakeside hotel after he was injured as a medic during World War I. He would then go on to write the famous novel. Why is it not coming to my mind right now? I'll think of it in a second. It's really embarrassing. He would write a famous novel there, A Farewell to Arms. There it is. And he would set it partly at Stresa and Lago Maggiore, if you're familiar with that novel. Now, a lot of people will spend time out on the lake taking a boat. There's boat service on a regular basis going to and from these beautiful little Borromean islands. Now, the Borromei were a noble family who own these islands and have owned them for centuries. And you can go out and visit their palaces and their beautiful botanical gardens, or even just wander around like on this island of fishermen. That's the translation of this one, and enjoying some charming back streets in these beautiful islands in the lake. So thanks everybody for joining me on this little trip of Piemonte. There's my info if you want to take a screenshot, or you can find me at www.guided-by.com.